Um, we're talking about independent workers, freelancers, artists, contract workers, part-time workers. And one of the things that happened when the pandemic put our economy in lockdown was, I think, really for the first time, Canadians and certainly Canadian governments finally understood and saw the reality that so many independent workers were living in this economy. It was the first time really that freelancers were recognized as a group of workers that actually needed to be supported. And I think that for many people, CERB was a lifeline because people's incomes just got totally wiped out. Today we're talking about, in many ways, a breach of trust that was created when CERB was announced. Most people were encouraged to apply for this benefit, and in a way it was sort of like, we're going to work out some of these details as we go. I think it's fair to say that what we're seeing here in the economy right now is millions of Canadian workers, many of them independent workers, without a lifeline, without a raft. And what we really need to do is create that raft, create a stronger floor upon which all workers, including independent workers, can stand, so that if we get into a situation like this again, we don't see the vast precarity that we see right now. To cut and to claw back at this point to that group of workers is, as I say, I think a gross breach of trust between this government and Canadian workers. And I'm going to throw it over to Jagmeet now, because I know he's going to talk about some of the minutiae of the Liberal failure here. But I just think that really this reveals the reality that so many independent workers live on a day-to-day basis, and we need to fix that.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Really appreciate you being here, and thanks for sharing those words and for the work that you do to fight for independent workers, for people that are in the gig economy, precariously employed people. Thanks so much, Andrew. So Andrew touched on it, and this is exactly what's going on. We've got a Liberal government that, through great journalistic investigative reporting, is giving hundreds of millions of dollars. In some case, if you total all the all the private companies receiving public money, these are over $1 billion in public money going to companies that have turned around and laid off workers and made profits. And they took public money, laid off workers, made profits. The Liberal government seems to have no concern about them, not trying to go after those companies, these very powerful and wealthy companies. But then we've got independent workers who are just struggling to get by. These are people who are self-employed. They met the criteria as laid out by CRA, applied in good faith, only to receive, weeks before the holidays, a letter saying they've got to pay back a massive amount of money. This is wrong. The Liberal government has it all wrong. They're going after the wrong people. They're going after self-employed people who are just earning enough to get by, and letting powerful and wealthy companies that have taken over $1 billion of public money turn around, lay off workers, and make a profit. They're being let off the hook. And this is something that we cannot allow to continue. So we are making a very direct demand to the Liberal government, to Justin Trudeau: stop the clawbacks against self-employed workers, stop going after workers who absolutely qualified for CERB, and go after the rich companies, the ultra wealthy, who have made profits in this pandemic and still took public money. Go after them. That's what our focus here is today. Donc, comme j'ai dit auparavant, je veux souligner le fait que ce gouvernement libéral veut attaquer les travailleurs indépendants au lieu de pénaliser les grandes entreprises qui ont reçu une grande quantité d'argent public et puis ils ont fait des grands profits. C'est eux que le gouvernement libéral doit pénaliser, pas les travailleurs indépendants qui essaient de rejoindre les deux bouts. c'est complètement en erreur. Ils ont appliqué pour la PCU en bonne foi. Et encore, on demande au gouvernement libéral, au Justin Trudeau, d'arrêter de pénaliser les travailleurs indépendants et au lieu de ça, de pénaliser les grandes entreprises, de s'assurer que les plus riches, les ultra riches, payent leur juste part. Donc, on va continuer de se battre pour les gens. Thanks so much. And we'll pass it on. Oh, my apologies. Pass it on to John, who is an independent worker from Newfoundland and Labrador. John is one of the people that is going through this right now. He's one of the people that will tell you what he experienced when he received this letter. It is very important for us to situate this in the real people and the fact that this government's going after the wrong folks. So please, I'd like to pass it on to John now. John will provide his story.
Hi, thank you. I moved to St. John's in mid-September in 2018 from Quebec, where I was a practicing self-employed professional artist, and with the intention of setting up my practice here. Now, I had visited St. John's twice before. I have family that relocated here years ago, and I decided to come here and for a change. And now, when I got here, I contacted Arts NL. I was told them that I was here on the island. I was an assessor for Arts NL. I then became an assessor for, excuse me, I don't know if you're familiar with the Prix Éloise for the Prix Acadien for the Franco-Acadien. So I was flown to Moncton. So I was slowly trying to integrate the community here. Now, in November of 2019, I received a grant from Arts NL, which was to begin in February, and it did. And lo and behold, in March, everything shut down here. Like, I was doing research at the rooms, I was at the archives, I was researching at Mann University, I was using their library for research, and everything was going honky-dory, but COVID hit, and that was it. So I started struggling, and living through a pandemic is very difficult in and of itself. Now, I was on several boards. I withdrew from those because I'm not a Zoom person, and it doesn't really help when you're trying to network when you don't know anyone. So my life fairly came to an end. I have family, but that's the extent of my connections. So CERB came along, and my partner and I sort of looked over whether I qualify or not. We figured I did, so I applied for CERB. Now, the CERB monies I was getting was to help me with sustenance, to buy food, to pay my internet, my electricity, gas, car, clothing, whatever, just regular stuff. Plus, I was trying to figure out how I was going to finish the work for my grant. Everything shut down. So I was pretty, in a tight spot. Now, on November 26th, I received this letter from the CRA. And I have to tell you, receiving that letter for me was like someone just throwing me off a precipice. I am unemployed right now. Everything is shut down. And the letter was very unclear. It said that maybe, they're not really sure, but maybe I do or maybe I don't qualify. But just in case, I better call, because if you don't, you have to pay $12,900 by December 31st. Now, needless to say, I didn't sleep Thursday night. Friday morning, I got up. First thing, I called the CRA. I had a 5-hour conversation with the CRA. I was put on hold most of the time. I spoke to a person who then said, hang on, I have to go phone my supervisor. So I was listening to music most of the time. They would come back, and then they would ask me a few more questions and then leave. Now, it seemed like more of an inquisition to me. What happened was that then they transferred me to another person. And so I was transferred from a person in Ontario to another person in Ontario to a person in Alberta who said to me, no, you're in the wrong department, I'm transferring you back. I said, please don't transfer me again. And they said, sorry, and off I was to Newfoundland, to someone in Newfoundland. Now, needless to say, the conversation ended with that they did not consider my status as a self-employed person. They did not consider my arts grant as employment revenue. And the conversation ended with, I have to provide them with a T4, and then if I don't, I have to pay them the money. Needless to say, the weekend went by. Monday I got up and I reached out far and wide, trying to help, calling, sending letters, phoning all responsible CARFAC, the member of the parliament, heritage member, everyone, seeking help for someone to help me navigate through the bureaucracy of what was happening. And up until now, I'm still waiting. I cannot say I'm going to have a joyous Christmas. This is very difficult, and I really believe that I'm not the only person in the situation. And I find it untenable that the government will tell me that they are giving out money to help people. And we all know, we all know that the arts is severely underfunded in Canada. And we all know that the COVID has hit the art community worldwide. Needless to say, St. John's, Newfoundland is already in difficult economic times. And so I would say, really, I don't have any idea how I'm supposed to pay back this money. Thank you.
John, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's also important to note, John's story is he applied in good faith. He needed this to survive. The whole point of CERB was to help out people like you, John, people like John, and you're not alone. There's so many people in John's position. Over 100,000 Canadians have received letters like this. People who applied in good faith, people who are self-employed, people who followed the rules. They are now being penalized. They're being faced with these letters. It's incredibly scary. And it's absolutely clear that when we were in Parliament, we wanted to prevent this from happening. So we put in place a motion that said that no one who applied in good faith would be penalized. Well, now that motion passed unanimously. Now it looks very clear that we've got people who applied in good faith that the Liberal government's going after. And this is wrong. The Prime Minister could fix this right now. The Prime Minister could send a directive right now and ensure people like John don't have to be so afraid right before the holidays. Make sure they know that, people who applied in good faith will not be pursued, will not be penalized. This has to happen right now, and it's essential that we do this. Thank you so much once again, and I'm going to pass the mic over to Melanie, who is going to now help us with the question phase. Thanks so much.
Sorry, before we do that, Andrew would like to respond. I'm just going to give him the ability to respond, and then we'll go to Nina, who will do questions.
Of course, that makes so much sense. Please, Andrew.
Thanks. Thank you, Jagmeet, and thank you, John. I wanted to just raise an issue that John underlined here, which is that for many independent workers, their income, their revenue comes from a variety of different sources. They're oftentimes juggling many different kinds of revenue, and oftentimes, because our tax system doesn't really accommodate the reality of work for so many Canadians, revenue, which in John's case included grant revenue, isn't necessarily recorded, isn't necessarily considered revenue in CRA's terms. And I also think it's important to underline that there are many gig workers, many people working for the Ubers and the Foodoras of the world, who are encouraged by the Liberal MPs to apply for CERB, and they created a lot of goodwill, frankly, around that encouragement. And now many of them have received letters as well. And so it's really gone right across the board. But I think it does underline some of the realities of the tax system that don't accommodate and understand the reality of work for so many independent workers. And I'll just leave it at that and throw it back to you, Jagmeet.
Thanks so much, Andrew, and really appreciate again the work that you do on this file. Andrew, for a long time, has been fighting for these exact same workers that are independent, self-employed, workers that are working precariously in different gig economy jobs, people that deserve a better shake at life. He's been fighting for them. And as an artist himself, Andrew knows what it's like being an artist, trying to make it in Canada, and how important it is that we support the arts. So thank you so much, Andrew. And now I'll pass it to Nina, who will then help us through the question phase. And if you've got any questions, we're ready for your questions. Si vous avez des questions, on est prêt pour vos questions. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Jagmeet. Oui, période de questions. Alors, si vous avez une question, vous pouvez me l'indiquer dans la boîte de clavardage ou vous pouvez juste lever votre main et je vais vous donner le droit de parole. So if you have any questions, you can either put it in the chat box and I could read it, or indicate that you have a question and then you can unmute and ask your question. If there are any questions, you could also put up your hand with the hand function on Zoom. So if there are any questions, please let me know. Alors, s'il y a des questions, vous pouvez l'indiquer dans la boîte de clavardage. If you have any questions, you can put it in the chat box, or you could put up your hand and I will let you unmute so that you could ask your question. I see a question. Question, please, by Jordan Press. Jordan, you can go ahead and unmute to ask your question.
Thank you. I didn't want to just unmute and then suddenly start talking over people. I think this question may be for you, Mr. Singh, and Mr. Cosgrove, for you as well. But my understanding is these letters don't say that you have to pay the money back, that it is about trying to verify some of the income information so that they do know that you qualified for when you had applied. So I'm just kind of curious to understand a little bit about, if that's the case, then what is the remedy to the situation right now, given that the CRA has said, well, we don't want any money paid back right now. So I'm just kind of curious if you can walk me through what the remedy should be, given that there is a message coming from the government that there's no repayment schedule attached to these letters at the moment.
Well, two parts, and I'll ask John to explain his experience as well. But two parts to this. Thank you very much for the question. So first off, it's the priority of this Liberal government. We're talking about people who are self-employed, who are just trying to get by. These aren't millionaires. These aren't billionaires. These are people, working people, just trying to get by. And the fact that this Liberal government is going after them in the first place, to me, is a massive problem. When great journalistic work has gone into uncovering really profitable companies that took public money, that made massive profits, that's who this government should be going after. I cited an example. There are 66 companies in Canada right now that received over $1 billion. They turned around, those 66 companies, receiving $1 billion of public money, turned around in this pandemic and paid out $5 billion in dividends to their shareholders. Now, just on the face of that, wouldn't it make more sense for the CRA to use those limited resources, be directed by the Liberal government, to go after those companies? We're talking billions of dollars here. That these companies clearly made a profit if they're paying their dividends, paying their shareholders dividends. Like, that should be the priority. That's one. The complete skewed approach that the Liberals would rather go after workers than these wealthy companies that made profits. These aren't self-employed people that made record profits. These are just people getting by. So that's one concern. The second concern is it is very unclear. The letters range from saying you've got to pay this money back right now. Some of them are people that are told, well, we're trying to verify. They make phone calls, and then it turns out CRA says, yep, you definitely have to pay us some money. And we're getting stories from people saying they've been told they have to repay. John's example, initially it was a letter saying we want to verify some things. After they asked some questions, now they're saying that he's got to pay back the money. That's the wrong approach. John is not who the Liberal government should be going after. They should be going after Extendicare and Sienna. These are long-term care homes, for profit, that made profits and paid out hundreds of millions of dollars in dividends to their shareholders. That's who this government should be going after, and that's my concern. And maybe, John, if you've got anything you want to add to that.
Yes. In my case, I would say it's when I got the letter and when I spoke to the CRA, no one mentioned net income, gross income. Now, the issue that I'm having with Canada Revenue Agency, like, I had grants when I was living in Quebec from the Conseil des Arts et des Lettres du Québec. And when you receive a grant from the Conseil des Arts et des Lettres du Québec, I later found out that when you receive one from the Canada Arts Council, you get a slip, a T slip of some sort. In Quebec, you get an RL. Now, in Newfoundland, you do not get a slip. So what they're contesting, and they're telling me, is that my grant is not considered employment income in Newfoundland and Labrador, but if I'm in another province, it is. So that's why I reached out far and wide to politicians, because I do not know how to decipher this language. I've always declared my income the same way, whether I was in Quebec or in British Columbia, and it's just now that I'm having an issue here. I do not know how to deal with this. So that's what it is for me. If I look at my revenue, I qualify if my grant is taken as employment revenue, but CRA will not take it that way. So that's the limbo I'm in.
Thanks so much, John. And back to you for a follow-up, if you might have a follow-up.
Yeah, the one thing I did want to ask is just simply this. I mean, obviously, having these letters right now is a bit of a Grinch on the holiday season, and particularly at a time when people are still trying to recover financially and make it financially. Would the situation in your mind be different if these letters arrived in March ahead of tax season, which, as I understand, and which kind of the government has already said, is going to be very complicated at tax time next year, just given what we have gone through this year? So I'm wondering about the timing, if there would be a difference in maybe the reaction, the feeling, if this arrived in late February and early March, as opposed to right now ahead of the holidays.
Well, it certainly would make sense that work would be done to figure out who owes money back in around the tax time. But again, I want to highlight the priorities of this government are wrong. The people they're choosing to go after. You know, people like John, we passed a motion in Parliament for this very reason. Hearing John's story, that is clearly someone that an artists rely on grants as a source of income. And obviously, as an artist, there's not going to be work during this pandemic. All the festivals and the public gatherings that one would require as an artist are not going to be there. So if someone in that field is applying for work, it makes sense. That is good faith. And my concern really, putting the timing aside, and sure, towards tax season, what might make more sense for timing, but really my concern is, why is this Liberal government making a choice here to ignore the profitable companies? The whole point of the public support, the wage subsidy, was to help companies that have lost income, that are going through a struggle. Well, if those companies turn around and end up being profitable in this pandemic, they should be the ones that are taxed, or there should be some recovery of CERB or the wage subsidy, from those companies. That to me is a major problem here. And we're talking of scales. If you look at self-employed and the amount of money that we're talking about, or if you look at some of these large corporations and the money we're talking about, there is far more money that has been sent towards large companies that could be recovered than going after self-employed. And these large companies are profitable. They're making a profit. That is the real concern here. Why is the Liberal government, why is Justin Trudeau choosing to target self-employed workers struggling to get by, rather than going after these companies that there's many reports now that have made massive profits in this pandemic? They should be the ones that are targeted. And,
all right, thank you. Yep.
Oh yes, pass it back to you.
Thank you, Jagmeet. So David, I think, just left. David, are you still there? I'm guessing not. If there are other questions, please indicate your intention to ask a question in the chat box. Si vous avez d'autres questions, n'hésitez pas d'indiquer votre intention de poser une question dans la boîte de clavardage. So yes, Jolson from iPolitics has a question. Yes, please go for it. You can type it up, given that your mic isn't working. Not a problem. So Jolson Lim from iPolitics asks, hey, Jagmeet, I just want to be clear what you believe the CRA should specifically do. Provide amnesty, reduce repayments, payment deferrals, an apology. Jagmeet, the floor is yours.
I really appreciate that. This is a great opportunity to clarify. I really thank you for the question. What should happen right now is the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, should issue a directive very clearly stating that self-employed workers that have applied in good faith, and they have, should not be the subject of any scrutiny. if you've applied in good faith, and this is a question of net versus gross income, which is the big question. This is, did someone earn $5,000? They were told if they earned $5,000 in the previous year or the previous 12 months, that would be good enough to apply. Then they added in this confusion around what that means. That was never clarified, and people were told to interpret it as broadly as possible. Those people who qualified, but now are being retroactively told that, oh no, there is a different definition we didn't tell you about. Those people should be given, there should be a directive by the Prime Minister to say, stop, completely stop going after these folks. They should be notified that it's okay, you applied in good faith, you're okay. And instead of going after those folks, so there should be an immediate end to pursuing people that are self-employed, that applied for CERB. In fact, it's more than just good faith. They applied with the information they had, and they did the right thing. They are absolutely, in my opinion, given all the evidence out there, they applied, in fact, with all the information available, they applied appropriately. They should be told it's okay. They should be notified immediately. And Justin Trudeau should provide a directive to CRA to go after these wealthy companies that have made profits. That's what I'd like to see happen immediately.
Do you have a follow-up, Jolson?
I'm also just looking in the chat box as well.
Yeah. Yes, I'm still confused as to what you mean by stop scrutiny. Would that mean a technical change to eligibility rules, i.e. allowing considering both net and gross income?
Yes, this would be saying very clearly the government messed up here by not providing this clarity, by not letting people know ahead of time, because on the landing pages, if you look at when people applied for CERB on the landing page, what the Prime Minister, what many members of Parliament in the Liberal government said, what the Finance Minister said was effectively total income. The Finance Minister, Bill Morneau, said literally, quote, total income of $5,000. So that gives a very clear impression that it was about what amount that you made, and they didn't put in any requirements on gross or net. So the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, should say, we messed up and didn't provide people clarity. It was our mistake. We didn't provide clarity. People who applied for CERB were not told when they first applied at that time. And there was a journalist I spoke to who actually had archived the CERB page and went back and said that it was not there anywhere on the landing page. So people who first applied thought it was their total income. They made the total income that was sufficient and applied. Those people should be told right now, you applied and you're okay. You applied and it is fine. We were not clear on whether it was gross or net. We did not provide that definition to anyone. And because you applied and you have met the threshold of the monetary level, $5,000 threshold, you are fine. That should be clarified, that the Liberal government never specified that. Once that's done, then the second thing should be to go after those who actually have made profits, these really profitable companies, large corporations. That's what this government should do. Instead of going after the self-employed, they should be told the self-employed did it right. We did it wrong in terms of the Liberal government not providing the details. Self-employed people are okay. They should be able to continue to enjoy the holidays, not have this fear of hovering over their heads. That's what needs to be done right away.
Thank you very much. If there are other questions, please indicate it to me now in the chat box. Si vous avez d'autres questions, veuillez me l'indiquer dans la boîte de clavardage. Alors, j'attends vos questions, waiting for your questions.
I just want to make a quick comment while you're waiting for another question, which is that, Revenue Canada and the government really need to take a look at what they consider income and what they don't consider income for independent workers. This is a fundamental thing, and it's a very frustrating thing for freelancers, for solo self-employed, for contractors. It affects their ability to for example, get a mortgage or a line of credit because oftentimes their gross income, not all of it is included as income. And that's part of what's going on here. I mean, but the larger question, and Jagmeet's already talked about it, is the the fact that the government is going after people that they think are making less than $5,000 and letting major corporations walk away with billions. But I think in terms of the question, there are many technical things Revenue Canada need to take a look at, and these changes have been long overdue.
Thank you very much, Andrew. If anyone is on a phone right now, si vous êtes sur un téléphone, please, you can go forward and unmute yourself and ask your questions. Si vous avez appelé par téléphone, je vous donne le plancher. Vous pouvez, vous pouvez allumer votre micro et poser votre question. Donc, je vais compter jusqu'à 10 dans ma tête. S'il n'y a plus de questions, on peut repasser ça à Jagmeet. I will count to 10 in my head. If there are no more questions, I will turn it back to Jagmeet. Jagmeet, c'est à toi. Jagmeet, back to you.
Yeah, thanks. I think, Andrew, you really made a really good point. You know, what we're talking about here in the argument of net versus gross is the Liberal government's basically saying these are people that earned less than 5,000, even though, you know, they earn 5,000 gross, their net is less than 5,000. These aren't wealthy people. The Liberal government's literally going after people that are struggling, that are just getting by. And I can't wrap my head around that. Why would this government, knowing full well there are large corporations that have posted serious profits that took public money, why wouldn't this government use all the resources they have to pursue those who made profits in this time period? Why wouldn't they do that? And I can't fathom why this government wouldn't use their resources to recover money from those who made profits, the wealthy and large corporations, rather than going after self-employed. It really comes down to that. And the priority has to be in this pandemic that we are as generous as possible with helping those in need, that we support those that applied that needed the help, and that we go after and ask the ones who have made massive profits, the wealthiest, to pay their fair share. That to me just makes sense. And we're going to continue to raise this, you know, basic question of the right priorities here. Who should be the ones paying for this pandemic? Certainly not the people that have struggled. Certainly not you or your families. Certainly not small businesses. Certainly not independent workers who are just getting by. It should be the ones who have profited massively. It should be the large corporations and the ultra wealthy that have the means to contribute. That's what we're talking about today, and that's what we're going to continue to fight for. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for being here. Thank you, John. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you to all the media that were present. Appreciate it. Thanks to the team. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.